We were shooting at each other, and it was the most honest conversation we'd had in 5 years. The industrial zone was dead at night, the kind of dead that hummed. Red warning lamps blinked like slow heartbeats along the hangars, reflecting off wet asphalt. Rain had passed recently, leaving the air sharp with metal and ozone. Adrenaline tasted like copper on my tongue. 2 minutes, I murmured into the mic. My voice stayed calm because leaders don't panic, especially Omega leaders who learned early that fear is a luxury. My team moved when I breathed, shadows sliding between crates, boots finding dry patches by instinct. Veterans, the kind command forgot because we didn't fit clean reports. The first shot cracked the night open. We scattered. Training took over, clean and merciless. I hit the ground, rolled, came up behind a rusted generator. Muzzle flashes strobed red, white, red. Not amateurs. Narcs. Contacts are disciplined, I said. Patterns wrong. Then I saw the angles. The spacing. The way the shots herded instead of hunted. Spec Ops, I whispered. My jaw locked. Damn it. Someone on my left swore softly. I raised a fist. Hold. The air shifted. Alpha pressure. Contained but unmistakable. Like a storm bottled behind glass. It threaded through the rain and rust and found me anyway. A low-frequency pull I hated for how familiar it felt. I lifted my scope. The optic framed him cleanly. Broad shoulders. Controlled stance. Helmet tilted just enough to scan without rushing. He hadn't changed the way I had. Or maybe he had. Just better hidden. Mark. 5 years ago, he stood beside me in a corridor that smelled like antiseptic and blood, telling me the order was final. 5 years ago, I watched my people get boxed into a kill zone because protocol. If this story caught you, subscribe. More are waiting. 5 years ago, I learned how easy it was to be brave when someone else paid the price. My breathing went shallow. I forced it slower. In through the nose. Out through clenched teeth. The familiar ache settled in my jaw. I welcomed it. Pain focused me. Dan. Someone hissed in my ear. Call it. I didn't answer. I watched Mark through glass, felt the memory of his hand on my shoulder. When he used to believe in me, or maybe I only believed in him. I watched him lift his rifle. If he fired, this would be simple. Ugly, but simple. If he fired, I'd stop thinking. My finger rested on the trigger. The rain slid down the barrel. Time thinned to breath and pulse and the tremor in my hands I refused to acknowledge. He had me. Clean line. Center mass. A commander's shot. Mark didn't pull the trigger. The world lurched. Cold surprise punched through my ribs. I sucked a breath so hard it hurt, and for a second my hands shook. Not fear, not exactly. Something old, unwelcome. Recognition. He shifted his aim a fraction, past me. A warning shot sparked off metal behind my cover. Enough to look right. Enough to buy a second. Break contact, I snapped. Now. We moved, ghosts dissolving into rain and shadow. Bullets chased but didn't catch. As I ran, I risked one last glance through the scope. Mark's visor tilted. Not at me. Away. Not a shot fired. The most honest answer he could give, and the one that left me angrier than a bullet ever could. The warehouse smelled like oil, old wood, and bad coffee. Home. Someone had strung mismatched lights along the beams, turning a place meant for crates into something that passed for living. Scarred tables. Salvaged couches. Weapons leaned against walls next to chipped mugs like they belonged together. Maybe they did. Next time, Reyes said, dropping into a chair that complained louder than he did, we vote for a job that doesn't involve getting shot at by the people with better funding. Motion denied, I said. You like complaining too much. A few chuckles rolled through the room. Low, tired, real. My people, not pristine soldiers, not heroes in recruitment videos. Veterans with limp. Wrists and metal in their bones. Eyes that scanned exits without meaning to. Broken. Sure. Still breathing. I stood at the table and pulled the map closer, pinning it with a knife because paper respected steel. We got herded, I said. Not hunted. That wasn't a mistake. Spec Ops, Mara muttered. She rubbed her shoulder, winced, then smirked. I knew my lucky jacket would betray me. Your jacket's older than you, Reyes shot back. I let them talk for a beat. Leaders who talk over their people don't last long, not here. When the noise settled, I nodded once. We were clean. We moved fast. We're alive. That matters. They looked at me then, not because I raised my voice, because I didn't have to. Dan, someone asked quietly. They didn't fire clean. Why? I tightened my jaw, felt the old ache bloom. Because sometimes, I said, people remember. The room went still, not reverent, aware. I didn't explain. I didn't have to. They trusted me because I never fed them lies dressed up as hope. After, when the gear was stowed and the jokes thinned, I sank onto the edge of a table and let memory do what it always did when the adrenaline faded. The mission they wrote off had been daylight bright and wrong from the start. Bad intel. Worse timing. I'd argued. I always argued. The answer came back stamped and cold. Proceed. I remembered the corridor, the sterile smell. Mark's voice, steady regret threaded through discipline. Orders, stand. I remembered choosing a different path anyway. Pulling who I could, losing who I couldn't. I remembered the report that followed, the neat language that turned lives into footnotes. Omega. Problematic. Non-compliant. They didn't write me off because I was weak. They wrote me off because I wouldn't stop choosing people over paper. I stood, rolled my shoulders, and grabbed my mug. The coffee was awful. Perfect. Get some rest, I said. We adapt. They did. Because leadership isn't a title. It's responsibility. And tonight, it was still mine. The base in my memory was always clean. Not clean like safe. Clean like erased. White floors that swallowed footprints. Lights that never flickered. Corridors that smelled faintly of antiseptic and control. Everything in its place. Everyone, too. That was where I learned who Mark really was. He stood beside the tactical table, helmet tucked under one arm, posture so precise it felt rehearsed. Alpha presence contained to regulation levels. No flaring, no pressure. Just a steady weight that made people straighten without noticing. He didn't talk much. He didn't have to. When he did, his words landed where they were meant to. Route is green, he said. We move at 04. I leaned over the map. The intel didn't sit right. Civilians haven't cleared Sector C, I said. We go in now. They're in the crossfire. A pause. Not long. Just long enough to mark the moment. Command confirms clearance, Mark replied. We proceed. I looked at him then. Really looked. The clean line of his jaw. The calm in his eyes that said he'd already decided. I felt the pull, low and irritating, thread through my chest. I hated that part. Hated that my instincts recognized him even when my brain was busy disagreeing. Command's wrong, I said. We wait, or we reroute. Protocol hummed between us like a live wire. People around the table went quiet, suddenly interested in their gloves. Mark met my gaze. There was something there. Regret, maybe, or warning. Orders stand. It was the first time we broke. The operation went forward. Shots echoed where they shouldn't have. Screams cut through comms. We pulled bodies out of smoke and blood and confusion, and I remember thinking how clean the base would look when we returned, how the floors would erase us again. After, in the corridor that smelled like failure and bleach, I stood in front of Mark and felt my hands shake. You knew, I said. You knew. I knew the order, he answered. His voice didn't waver. That hurt more than anger would have. I turned away before I said something I couldn't take back, or before I admitted how badly I wanted him to step out of line with me. To choose people, to choose us, in whatever shape that might have taken. The consequences came fast. Reports, reviews, quiet conversations that ended careers without raising voices. I was reassigned, labeled difficult. He was promoted. The system rewards compliance. It always has. I carried the bitterness like a second spine. He carried the rank. And somewhere between protocol and pulse, the pull stayed, unspoken, unresolved, waiting for a night. When we'd face each other again through rain and glass, and finally tell the truth without words. Daylight changed everything. The buffer zone looked harmless in the sun, chain-link fences softened by weeds, concrete bleached pale, a strip of no man's land pretending to be neutral. No weapons allowed, no uniforms, just distance measured in rules. I was halfway across it when I realized I wasn't alone. Mark stood near the fence line, sleeves rolled, hands visible. Civilian jacket, scuffed boots. He looked human. It annoyed me more than the helmet ever had. "So," I said, stopping a careful 6 feet away, "you always choose scenic routes, or am I special?" His mouth twitched. "Still sharp," he replied. "I hoped time might dull it." "Time's lazy," I said. "It lets rust do the work." We stood there, sun on concrete, the space between us loud. His alpha presence stayed leashed, deliberate, respectful. I felt it anyway, a low tide tugging at my senses, carrying the faintest note of him. Clean fabric, iron, something restrained. My jaw tightened. I breathed through it. "Last night," he said, eyes steady. "Could have gone differently." "It could have," I agreed. "It didn't." Silence settled. Not hostile, not friendly, familiar in the worst way. "You still think I chose the order over people," he said. I laughed once, short and dry. "No, I think you chose the order instead of people." Subtle difference. He winced, quick, controlled. "I didn't know." "You knew enough," I shot back. Sarcasm slid into place, like armor. Ignorance wears the same boots as intent. A breeze cut across the strip, carrying the smell of grass and dust. And him. The pull stirred, unwanted. I shifted my weight, kept my hands loose. Control was a skill. I'd learned it the hard way. Mark noticed. Of course he did. He took a step back, giving me space without comment. It mattered. I hated that it did. "We're not enemies," he said quietly. "But we're not allies either." "Neighbors," I said. "We share a fence. We don't borrow sugar." That earned a real smile. Small. Tired. Fair. A truck passed somewhere behind him. Normal life noise. The world pretending it wasn't built on decisions like ours. "If our people cross paths again," he said, "I'll keep them clear." I studied his face for lies. Found none. Found something else instead. Resolve, maybe. Edged with regret. "See that you do," I said. "I don't want to have the same conversation twice." We turned away at the same time. No handshake. No promises. Just the understanding that daylight didn't make us friends, but it didn't make us enemies either. And for now, that thin strip of neutral ground was enough. I wasn't there when the order came in, but I could picture the place anyway. The official headquarters had a smell, like the base from my memories. Polished floors, recycled air, and authority pretending to be neutral. Mark later told me he'd always known when something was wrong by the way the room went quiet before the words landed. The briefing room lights dimmed. Screens bloomed to life. Operation parameters updated, the voice said. Flat. Clean. Final. Mark stood with his team, hands clasped behind his back, alpha presence tucked neatly inside the lines. He listened. He always listened. That was the first inconsistency. Too many updates, too fast, stitched together like a patch job. Sector maps rotated, routes highlighted in sterile blue. "This zone?" Mark asked, keeping his tone even. "It's been listed as inactive. Reclassified," the voice replied. Reclassified. The word slid wrong. He scanned the data, felt the irritation rise. Details that didn't line up, timestamps that overlapped, a supply window that assumed cooperation from people who didn't exist on paper. Then the label appeared, veteran holding area. His jaw tightened. He felt it before he understood why. The same low tug that wasn't instinct, not exactly. Memory, maybe. A man in daylight, 6 feet away, sarcasm sharp as shrapnel. "Clarify objectives," Mark said. "Rules of engagement?" A pause. Microseconds. "The kind you miss if you're not looking." "Maintain discretion," the voice said. "Avoid exposure." Avoid exposure, not avoid casualties. not secure extraction. The language had rot in it. Mark's irritation sharpened into something else, an itch under the skin he couldn't scratch. He remembered a corridor that smelled like bleach, remembered choosing the order because that's what kept things moving, because stopping felt like mutiny. He felt it again now, the system's weight, familiar and suddenly heavy. "Commander," someone murmured beside him. "This doesn't sit right." Mark didn't answer. He stared at the map, at the neat blue lines that pretended to be clean. He thought of the buffer zone, of a warehouse that smelled like bad coffee and survival, of people who didn't fit reports. "Proceed as briefed," the voice said. "Yes, sir," Mark replied automatically, and then stopped himself. The word tasted wrong. He cleared his throat, requesting confirmation on civilian presence. Another pause. Longer this time. Negative. The lie was small, precise, and it cracked something. As the lights rose and the room filled with the scrape of chairs, Mark felt the anxiety settle in his chest, cold and unwelcome. Irritation followed, then doubt, sharp, persistent. For the first time in years, he didn't trust the order in his hands. And for the first time, he wondered what would happen if he didn't follow it. Old connections never die. They just go underground. The bar had no name, which was the point. Neon bled through cracked windows, painting the floor in tired colors. The air smelled like spilled beer, ozone from cheap generators, and stories people didn't tell sober. I slipped inside, hood up, senses tuned, not flaring, just listening. "Dan." A voice rasped from the corner. "Still breathing. Figures. Missed you too, Cole," I said, sliding into the booth. He looked worse than last time, one eye clouded, hands steady only when they were wrapped around a glass. Alive, though. That counted. I didn't waste time. Neither did he. "They're running off book," Cole said, tapping ash into a tray that used to be a plate. "Black roots. Cleanups with no paperwork. Veterans," I asked. "Among others." His mouth twisted. "You weren't the last inconvenient asset. We moved locations as the night wore on, closed warehouses with doors that only opened. For the right knock, old shelters where maps were etched into tables with knives. Names changed, faces aged, but the pattern stayed the same. Orders that didn't quite fit, missions that ended in silence, people who disappeared between reports." "Spec Ops too?" I asked finally. A woman with a scar like a question mark across her cheek nodded. "Especially Spec Ops. Plausible deniability cuts both ways." The words settled heavy in my gut. I thought of Mark's controlled stance, the way he kept his presence leashed, the pause in his shot. "So the system eats its own," I said. "Only the ones who start thinking," Cole replied. By dawn, my head ached and my patience was gone. The proof lined up ugly and undeniable. Dates, coordinates, signatures that climbed the ladder and vanished into policy. I leaned back against cold concrete and exhaled. I'd built Mark into my personal villain because it was easier than hating something faceless. Because anger needed a target. But the more I traced the lines, the clearer it became. He fit the pattern too well. Promoted fast. Trusted. Used. "Damn it," I muttered. The choice wasn't clean. Nothing ever was. I could keep him in my sights. Treat him like the system's fist. Or I could accept what the evidence suggested, that he might be another blade pointed by someone else's hand. I stood, pulling my hood tighter. Outside, the city yawned awake, indifferent. If Mark was a victim, not a villain, then the war I thought I was fighting had just changed shape, and I had to decide whether I'd let old anger keep me safe, or blind. The transport hub was a skeleton, rails rusted into ribs, platforms collapsing into shadow. Wind tunneled through broken signage, carrying the metallic echo of trains that hadn't run in years. Perfect place for a meet. Perfect place for a trap. I knew it the moment the air went wrong. "Down," I said. Too late. Fire erupted from the upper catwalks. Not wild. Measured. Someone had planned this. We scattered. Boots scraping on gravel. Breath burning in our lungs. My team moved like a body with too many old scars. Still lethal, still precise. Angles are boxed, Mara barked. We're pinned. I swore. The route I'd cleared closed behind us with a clang that rang like laughter. Then the pressure hit, alpha, controlled and deliberate, and I knew who'd stepped onto the board. Mark's voice cut through comms I hadn't given him access to. Hold your positions. Like hell, I snapped, popping up long enough to draw fire. This your idea of neighborly? Listen, he said. You're about to get flanked. By who? By my people, he answered. And there it was. The truth. Sharp as glass. And I'm changing the plan. Orders be damned. Shots shifted, not toward us. Away. Suppressive fire carved a corridor through the catwalk, buying seconds that felt like minutes. I saw Mark then, moving into the open, rifle barking, body placed where it could be seen. Drawing attention, drawing fire. Cover left. He shouted. I did. My team did. We flowed through the gap like water finding a crack. The ambush unraveled, confusion rippling through it as commands died mid-sentence. When it ended fast. A final exchange, boots retreating, silence slamming down so hard my ears rang. We stood among the aftermath. Blood darkened the gravel. Some of it ours. Steam rose from hot metal. No one spoke. I turned and found Mark a few paces away, helmet off, hair plastered to his forehead with sweat. A cut along his brow bled freely. He didn't wipe it. You broke protocol, I said. Yes. You compromised your up. Yes. You protected my people. Yes. The honesty knocked the fight out of me. My hands shook. I curled them into fists until it passed. Why? He met my eyes. No rank. No performance. Because the order was wrong. The wind rattled a loose sign overhead. Somewhere, a drop of blood hit stone. I exhaled. You realize what this costs you? I do. I studied him. The set of his shoulders, the way his presence stayed leashed even now. Not dominating. Not demanding. Choosing. Next time, I said, voice rough. We plan together. A corner of his mouth lifted. Agreed. We didn't shake hands. We didn't need to. In the quiet, among blood and rust, we stood without cover, and for the first time, on the same side. The shelter was an old service tunnel sealed off decades ago. Concrete. Walls sweating damp, a single lantern throwing a warm circle of light. Safe enough. Quiet enough. Too close for comfort. Adrenaline hadn't let go of me yet. My pulse hammered, every sense dialed up until the air itself felt loud. Blood and rain and metal still clung to us, and under it, him. Mark's scent threaded through the space, restrained but present, like a hand hovering inches from a bruise. I noticed the shift in myself, and swore softly. Of course, I muttered. Now. Mark heard. He always did. He stopped where he was, a careful distance away, hands open, posture loose. His alpha presence tightened. Not stronger, just more contained. A conscious retreat. You want space? He asked. Yes, I said. Then corrected myself. No, maybe. Damn it. A beat. Then he huffed a laugh, short and surprised. Biology's inconvenient timing remains undefeated. I snorted despite myself. The tension eased a notch. You could write a paper. I'd rather not, he said. Peer review sounds dangerous. The humor helped. So did the way he kept his gaze level, not pushing, not claiming. Control, not command. My breathing slowed. The tremor in my hands faded. Thank you, I said, and meant more than the obvious. He nodded once. Instincts aren't orders. The words settled between us. Solid and unexpected. I sat on a crate and pressed my palms to my thighs, grounding myself in the cold through fabric. The lantern flickered. You broke rank back there, I said. Again. Once, he replied. I changed the plan. For us. For people, he corrected gently. I looked up at him then. Really looked. The cut on his brow had stopped bleeding. He'd cleaned it with a competence born of repetition. Not a hero. Not a villain. A man who'd decided where the line was. You didn't have to do that, I said. I did, he answered. No hesitation. The closeness surprised me. Not physical, not quite. Trust, like a bridge laid plank by careful plank. I felt it in my chest, warm and alarming. We sat in the quiet, sharing water, trading clipped updates. When our shoulders brushed, neither of us flinched. Next time, I said, a ghost of a smile tugging at my mouth, we add a warning label. Agreed, he said. Hazardous biology. We both smiled then, small, real. And for a moment, the war outside the tunnel felt far away. The server room lived beneath a condemned office block, humming like a trapped insect. Racks of salvaged machines lined the walls, their LEDs blinking in uneven rhythms. Darkness pooled in the corners, the screens threw blue light across our faces, making us look like ghosts, haunting our own evidence. I leaned over the terminal while Mark stood watch, presence muted to a whisper. Fingers flew. Passwords cracked. Old favors paid themselves back in access and silence. Here, I said quietly. Files bloomed open. Logs, roots, signatures stacked like bones. Dates jumped out first. The mission they'd called a failure. The next one. And the next. Patterns don't lie. They repeat until someone notices. Veteran redeployment, I read. Asset consolidation. I laughed once. Sharp. That's what they call it. Mark stepped closer. The light caught his eyes. I watched recognition dawn and harden. He scanned the timelines, the after-action reports that never reached public channels. Casualties listed as environmental. Operations marked contained. This one, he said, voice low. That's my op. I scrolled. The annotation sat there like a bruise, acceptable losses. A footnote linked to procurement. Funding, increased after failure. They used you, I said. Anger rose hot and familiar. They used us. Mark swallowed. His jaw worked, tension finally breaking through the discipline. I signed off, he said. I didn't see. You saw what they wanted you to see, I cut in, then stopped myself. I breathed. Slower. That's the point. More files. More proof. Orders routed through shell departments. Clean hands everywhere. Blood nowhere. Veterans boxed into impossible corridors. Spec Ops sent to contain what command had already decided to erase. Mark sank onto a crate. The lantern buzzed. I thought... He stopped. Tried again. I thought following the order kept people safe. Guilt radiated off him, thick and choking. I felt it like pressure behind my eyes. My anger sharpened, then twisted into something harder to carry. They built the system to reward obedience, I said. You did what it taught you. That doesn't absolve me. No, I agreed. It explains you. He looked up, eyes raw. I was a pawn. Yes, I said. And so was I. Difference is, they taught you how to move. Silence filled the room, punctuated by the steady hum of machines. I closed the files and copied everything to a secure drive, my hands steady even as my chest burned. We expose this, I said. But we do it smart. Mark nodded, resolve cutting through the guilt. Whatever it costs. I met his gaze, saw the weight there and the choice forming. My anger stayed, but it made room for something else. Good, I said. Because now you know who the enemy is. The call came through a closed channel. No identifiers, no ceremony. The kind of line that exists to keep secrets from echoing. We sat in the shelter's dim light. The screen between us a narrow window into a voice that believed it still owned us. Commander Mark, the voice said. You're out of position. Mark didn't look at me. His shoulders squared. I'm listening. I could hear the pitch shift. Authority wrapping itself in concern. They always did that first. Reassurance before the knife. There's been a misunderstanding. The voice continued. We can resolve it. Quietly, the screen pulsed. A file name appeared. My name. I laughed under my breath. It came out wrong. Stand down, the voice said. Deliver the asset. We'll handle the rest. Mark's jaw tightened. Define asset. Dan, the voice replied. He's compromised, dangerous, non-compliant. I leaned back, crossed my arms. You forgot Omega, I said mildly. The voice ignored me. In exchange, your record is cleared. Command restored. Future secured. Silence stretched. The weight of it pressed on my ribs. I watched Mark's hands. Steady. Open. The screen's light cut sharp lines across his face, highlighting the choice taking shape there. You should take it, I said quietly. He turned then, eyes snapping to mine. No. Listen to me, I said. This is how you survive systems like this. You trade people. They'll make you a hero again. His voice dropped. I won't trade you. Don't make this about me, I snapped, then softened. Make it about your people. That's exactly what I'm doing, he said. The voice intruded, impatient. Commander, respond. Mark faced the screen. His alpha presence didn't flare. It steadied. Controlled. Chosen. I decline, he said. A pause. Then, be advised. This decision carries consequences. Yes, Mark replied. It does. The channel cut. The shelter hummed back into existence. I exhaled, a shaky laugh escaping before I could stop it. You're terrible at career management. He smiled. Brief. Wry. You're not great for my health. I stood, feeling the ground shift under my feet. Not fear, not relief. Something else. Respect, maybe. Or trust. Finally earned. They'll come for you, I said. They already were, he answered. We stood there. The choice made. The line crossed. No speeches. No regret. Just two people who decided which side of the war they were on, and who they wouldn't give up to stay alive. The conflict zone had no edges, just rubble melting into smoke, open sky split by tracer fire. Sirens wailed somewhere distant, a city trying to pretend this wasn't happening in its bones. Patches flashed on sleeves as people moved into position, old insignia stitched over newer lies. Positions, I said, voice steady. I didn't raise it. I didn't need to. Veterans fanned out along broken concrete, using angles the map never taught because maps never bled. They watched me, waiting. Trust is a quiet thing. It doesn't announce itself. Mark stood a few steps to my right, headset live, jaw set. He'd brought a slice of his unit, the ones who asked questions, the ones who didn't fit clean. The system called them difficult. I called them useful. 2 squads pushing center, someone reported. Marked as friendly. Friendly doesn't mean safe, I said. Hold fire. Let them commit. They did. Command always pushed first, counting on momentum and fear. I waited for the tell, the slight stagger, the overcorrection. When it came, I raised my hand and cut it down. Now, we moved, not faster, smarter. Veterans pinned from cover they'd prepared without realizing it. Mark's people cut supply lines with precision, no wasted motion. He coordinated without barking, decisions clean and immediate. When his presence touched the field, it didn't dominate, it aligned. Fire erupted. The enemy advanced anyway, patches bright, orders loud and wrong. I felt the old anger spark and set it aside. Anger clouds timing. Left flank is soft, Mara said. Mark, I said. Your call. He didn't hesitate. Shift right. Draw them. Dan, take the left. No rank. No protocol. Just clarity. We did. The trap closed like a held breath finally released. When the smoke thinned, the push stalled. Confusion rippled through the opposing line as their commands contradicted each other, routed through too many hands. A shot rang out too close. Mark stepped into it, pulling one of mine back behind cover. He didn't look for approval. He didn't need it. Leadership isn't volume. It's timing. When it ended unevenly. Retreats and arrests, weapons dropped, patches torn off in the dirt. The open zone fell quiet, wind carrying the smell of scorched metal and rain. We stood among it, chests heaving, hands shaking from more than exertion. Someone laughed. Short, incredulous. Someone else sat down hard and swore. I looked at Mark. He met my gaze, eyes bright with resolve, not triumph. They'll spin this, he said. Let them, I replied. We're not playing their game anymore. He nodded. Around us, veterans and defectors alike took stock, finding a strange, fragile calm in the absence of orders. Leadership outside the system felt like this, messy, earned, and shared. And for the first time, it felt like it might be enough. The temporary camp rose in a hollow where the wind couldn't decide which way to blow. Tents leaned against one another like exhausted soldiers. Med kits lay open, red-stained gauze piled neatly, because order was how we kept from thinking too hard. The wounded came first. Always. I moved from cot to cot, checking grips, eyes, breath. Names mattered. They grounded people. They grounded me. Hey, I said softly to Reyes, adjusting the wrap on his forearm. You're not allowed to die. You still owe me for that jacket joke. He smiled thinly. Put it on my tab. We lost some. Not many, but enough. A helmet sat on a crate with no owner. No one touched it. Silence settled heavy and unarguable. Mark stood at the edge of the light, hands dirty, shoulders bowed. Not hiding. Waiting. When I finished, I nodded him over. I should have questioned sooner, he said. No qualifiers, no defenses. I trusted the system when I should have trusted people. I listened. That was the hardest part. Forgiveness likes to sprint. Responsibility walks. I won't excuse it, he continued. But I won't repeat it. I met his gaze. That doesn't fix what's broken. No, he said. It fixes what comes next. We stood there, the camp breathing around us. Somewhere, someone cried quietly. Somewhere else, someone laughed too loud. Grief does that. It frays the edges. You saved lives, I said finally. So did you. I didn't have a choice, I replied. You did. He accepted that. Let it land. I'm not asking for absolution. Good, I said. I'm not ready to give it. The lantern flickered. The air cooled. He took a step back, giving me space without being told. It mattered more than an apology. We sat on opposite sides of the fire as night deepened, sharing quiet and responsibility. The price had been paid in blood and names and things that don't come back. The ledger didn't balance, but it never does. I watched Mark in the firelight. Steady, present, changed. Not forgiven, not condemned. Still here. The exposure didn't happen in a blaze of sirens or a single heroic broadcast. It happened the way truth usually does. Piecemeal, undeniable, shared by people who were tired of carrying it alone. Screens filled with documents, timelines, names that had learned to hide behind titles. The room, half press, half oversight, buzzed with a disbelief that curdled into anger as the pattern took shape. Clean language stripped bare. Acceptable losses, translated into faces. I stood off to the side, hands in my pockets, watching the system choke on its own words. Mark stepped forward when they called his name. No uniform, no patches, just a man with a spine he decided to use. I'm resigning my commission, he said, voice even. Effective immediately. A murmur rippled. Someone tried to interrupt. He didn't let them. I won't lead inside a structure that mistakes obedience for integrity, he continued. Leadership is a choice. Today, I'm choosing not to pretend. He didn't look at me. He didn't need to. The decision had already been made. When it was over, when the room emptied and the air felt lighter for reasons that had nothing to do with ventilation, I found him in the corridor, leaning against a wall that had never seen a battlefield. So, I said, you just fired yourself. He smiled, tired and real. I hear it's a growth opportunity. I snorted. Bold move. Terrible benefits. Worth it. I studied him, then nodded once. Good. Outside, the city kept moving. It always did. I felt the old reflex tug, brace, prepare, accept the role handed to me. I let it go. I'm not a victim, I said. Mostly to myself. I'm done wearing that. Mark's gaze softened. I never thought you were... Careful, I said. Flattery leads to expectations. He laughed. Quiet, honest. No domination, no posturing. Humor and honesty, I agreed. Radical concepts, We walked out together, not side by side in formation, not leading or following. Just choosing the same direction for now, not roles. Choice. The new base didn't look like much. Sunlight poured through wide windows that hadn't been there before, catching dust in slow, lazy spirals. The air moved freely. No recycled hum, no antiseptic lie. Someone had painted a wall and given up halfway, leaving a stripe of blue like a promise still in progress. Life, unfinished and honest. People moved through the space without waiting for permission. Veterans, defectors, planners who preferred questions to checklists. Maps shared wall space with coffee machines. Weapons stayed racked unless they were needed. It felt lighter. I watched it come together and felt something in my chest ease. Mark leaned against a table, sleeves rolled, no rank to weigh his shoulders down. "We'll need a rotation schedule," he said, "and a way to argue that doesn't involve shouting." I raised a brow. "You're suggesting rules?" "Guidelines," he corrected. "Flexible ones." "Look at you," I said. "Rebranding." He smiled. "Don't get used to it." We walked the perimeter, checking doors that didn't lock unless they had to. Outside, the day stretched wide and unthreatening. I realized my jaw wasn't clenched for once. "You staying?" I asked, casual like it didn't matter. He met my eyes. "If you'll have me," I considered it, then nodded. "On probation." "Fair," he said. "I'll bring coffee." "Bad coffee," I warned. "Tradition matters." We stopped near the windows. The city breathed. Somewhere, someone laughed. I felt the pull again. Not sharp this time, just present. Choice over instinct. Always. "Funny thing," I said. "I used to think winning meant choosing the right side." Mark tilted his head. "And now?" "Now I think it means choosing," I said. Period. He reached out. Not claiming, not directing. Just offering. I took it. We stood there, light and air and the quiet work of building something better around us. No orders. No patches. Just people who'd decided to stop being used. We're no longer on opposite sides of the war. We're on the same side of the choice.